All right, welcome everybody, and we're going to call the Council Priorities meeting to order. And thanks for being here. It's just a little bit past 1 o'clock, so we want to make sure we get started. Now I have to find my agenda here. Oh boy. So a motion, please, to accept the agenda for the Council Priorities meeting. Moved by Councillor Kuntz, second by Councillor Arneson. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Items for discussion are items B. The following is a result of a referral from April the 15th. And we're going to turn it over to staff to lead us through this discussion for the next hour and a half.
I wonder if I could make a...
Just a moment. Okay. All right, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some very detailed notes here, but I noticed that the mayor has submitted a short page of notes, as has Councillor Woodward. So I wonder if we can deal with Councillor Woodward's and the mayor's recommendations before we move into mine. Mine aren't all recommendations. A lot of them are questions. All
right. Well, I guess it's going to be up to the committee how we want to handle this. But my thoughts were we were going to, and maybe you have different thoughts too, Ms. Bauer, but that we would walk through the procedural bylaw point by point, and we can discuss each one or move it from there, right? What do you think?
Okay. In looking at what we did last time, we did that last time where we walked through point by point. My suggestion would be, again, similar to Councillor Richter, where we start with those that were submitted. So there was Mayor Froese, yourself, Councillor Long, and Councillor Woodward, and then into Councillor Richter's list of concerns.
Did Councillor Long have a list?
Yes, he did. It was attached to the agenda. It just included a discussion on notice of motions.
Okay, I didn't see that.
It was in the package. On the back page, it was only about this long.
Yeah, it doesn't. Don't worry. I don't have a whole lot about that. Okay, so what's the will of council then? I mean, I think we could just go through it just as easy and say these ones are not contentious, and when we hit the contentious one, we stop and discuss it. Would that be all right? That way,
from this list, or
just from the actual bylaw itself.
I think based on the way Councillor Richter submitted them, I think it would be better to go through her list.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll let you lead the discussion.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with Mayor Froese's discussion. He was inquiring about changes to a delegation application. He highlighted two things, and what he presented was one was make a presentation on a matter of the broad interest that falls within the jurisdiction of council. This is a provision used in several municipalities where delegations are directed to be more of things that council has purview on. So things to do with, I guess, federal or provincial government wouldn't be brought before council. The other one he did is actually same thing, is just the jurisdictional issue was his discussion.
Which procedural points would that be affected? Which numbers would that be?
It would be in the delegation section of the bylaw. We'd add it as a restriction.
Okay.
Part 13.
Yeah, part 13
Yeah,
is
if we can
the
go by the
delegation.
numbers, because I've been doing the whole number thing all weekend here. So that's 13 point.
Well, we would have
06?
to add it as there's nothing in there, but so likely it could go in. Yeah, it would be I guess additional to 13.5, where the following guidelines apply to delegations. So we could add in a 13.5.
Like a D?
Yeah, like a D, and go from there.
Okay, but if that's the case, then we should put these off until we get to the delegation section, because I've got a lot of points around delegations.
Yes.
And
It's kind of been
depending on how we resolve that, my points could all become
That's
moot.
fine. We can definitely address the delegation. I think that was later in your package anyway, so we can definitely leave it till there.
Okay.
Okay.
And what's the next one?
Councillor Long, you wanted to discuss notice of motion.
And I don't have any specific, I can't be repeating what my motion was before, but I think it's something that should be discussed.
Okay, and I've got a note in that on page 4 with regards to 10.12, notice of motion, page 12. So we can maybe address
Okay, we can
Councillor
address that then.
Long's sections there as well.
All right. And then
Okay, so moving along to Councillor Woodward.
Okay.
Again, there's a delegation issue to be discussed, which we can, again, put off till we get to the delegations. Section 9, you were asking if the mover of a motion could have 3 minutes to introduce the motion that does not use one of their 2 times to speak. that would be the will of
Pretty
council.
self-explanatory. I think that it's a couple times where you introduce a motion and you consume one of your only two chances, and then other people have two. It's hard, and I think even if it's a minute or 2 minutes, some way to introduce a motion that isn't consuming a debate opportunity would just be my suggestion. Thank you.
And what section would that be?
That's section 9.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Yeah, and that, I've got notes on section 9 as well, too, that I would want
Okay.
to talk
Okay.
about.
So I think we are going to end up going through the whole
Yeah,
thing
we're
from the
gonna go
beginning.
through
That's my
Council-
preference.
Well, Councillor Richter's, yeah, maybe we'll just begin with Councillor Richter's and add those in as we go.
All right, well, just a sec. Councilor Whitmarsh, you wanted to make a comment?
I guess I was just trying to clarify, like, what we're doing, whether we're talking about those ones, or we're just gonna go one at a time through and take a vote, or how are we approaching it?
Whichever works best for
Okay,
you.
well, my preference, and I think I'm just going to say this as chair, is that we start at the beginning and go through, and the ones that are non-contentious, we can just tick them off.
Right.
And I've made notes on all the ones that other councils have submitted information about, so we could stop at those and debate them, and I think a motion would be required then if we're going to change any of the procedural items. That would be fair?
Okay.
Okay, so let's go to the very beginning then,
Go to the beginning.
and
So are we starting with the table of contents, or are we starting with,
The table of contents, I think, will be more reflective on the discussion if we have to go back and alter the table of contents.
okay,
So
well,
maybe-
the only thing that I would flag on the table of contents then is I have suggested that we put in a default section that says, in the absence of a specific rule, that we default to Robert's Rules of Order current issue or edition. So that would need to, I think, go into the table of contents
Okay.
if it's approved by council.
Okay, if it's, yeah, anything that's approved by council that affects the table of contents, I would go back and amend the table of contents anyway.
exactly, yeah. Okay, so then if we go to part 1 and part 2 definitions, was there
Yes.
anything on those? Where's
So Councillor Richter had made a note about public notice posting place. I did a little research on the weekend. The public meeting notice place is actually in the community charter, and it does need to be specific. The current definition does include website in addition to our requirement. We prefer to keep it at website just due to the fact that due to changes in technology and changes in email addresses and structure to the site, it would be very difficult to maintain a direct link.
Okay, so this means that if we've got it in hard copy somewhere in the hall, and
It has to be in hard copy in the hall. There's no ifs,
No,
ands, or buts about
okay.
that one. And we have to be specific on where it is, which is why it says the notice board on the second floor there.
Okay,
Okay?
but we are adding in the township
It's already been in
website.
there.
Okay.
It was added the last go-round in 2014.
May I ask something? In Councilor Richter's email, she asked that we all got copies of her submissions.
It's in the distribution list.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, that's all right. Yeah. Thank you. I just want to follow along as we
Yep.
go here.
So following along with definitions, Councillor Richter had questions on quorum. The current best practice is actually that it is written as greater than 50% or greater than half. The reasoning for that is to include 50 plus 1 doesn't include the numbers between 50.00001 and 50.99999. So the best practice is to always include more than half.
Okay.
Okay, but
Can you give
I
an
think
example of
more
that?
than half is open to question?
No, more than half is more than 50%. So 50.01 is more than half.
Right.
But it would not include 50 plus 1.
All right. So what I'm going to do, because this could go on forever, is if anybody wants to make a motion to change something, they need to make a motion, otherwise we're going to keep moving.
Yeah, great.
All right.
Okay, going down next to social media. It is a broad definition in this package, and that is because social media is changing. I don't know about you, but I learned Facebook, and my kids are already off to whatever social media platform comes next. So we don't want to be very careful about specifying any social media. We'd have to update the bylaw every time. Further, the social media definition actually only applies to council in the bylaw. It just basically says that council wouldn't be engaging in social media during a meeting. It does not indicate whether there would be, that we have no control over the outside world And the outside world isn't covered by the bylaw, I guess is the best way to
Can
explain
I
it.
text my wife during the meeting?
Yes, that's not social media. If, it just
Never
depends on
mind.
what you consider.
Okay, I'll keep the jokes to a minimum. All right, anything else on that? Social media? Oh, we got all kinds of people. All right. Ferguson is, well, your light went on, so it must be you then. Yes,
first.
sorry, yeah.
I would just suggest that you add website or mobile application to also cover off.
Sure.
Because website, I
Webs-
could use a mobile app and I don't meet the definition. So just a suggestion.
Website and
Mobile
mobile app.
application, yeah.
Yeah, and that I think would be broad enough that it would work. See what I
Okay.
said? It changes so fast, I can't keep up.
Next is Council Richter.
Yeah, no, I'm objecting to the inclusion of social media in the definitions, period. Because unless it's restricted to TOL, I don't think there's any reason why this definition should be included in our bylaw.
So if later on we remove anything to do with social media, then this would come back, kind of like the table of contents,
Yeah, it would
right?
be exactly the table of
Right
contents.
now, it's
If
a
we remove the
definition.
section that just dealt with social media, we would remove social media from the definition.
Okay, does everyone understand that? But there is if the definition stays in, it's going to be broadened to include website and
Yep.
and laptops or whatever, okay? All right, next.
So moving down, we have,
If I was you, I wouldn't turn my light on either. But I just want, because my first point was what Councillor Woodward had indicated, but because social media is so kind of interesting and challenging, how about, what are other folks doing in other communities? Because, I mean, you guys all have to stick together.
it is very varied. Some bylaws don't include it. Some bylaws go as far as to say councillors can't do anything on a phone, iPad, whatever, during a meeting unless they ask the leave of council or the leave of the mayor, in the event of emergencies being excluded. So it really depends on what council wishes to see. It goes from no regulation to don't touch it. And it just depends on how you'd like to do it. Okay?
Else? Good, all right.
Okay,
moving on
so
then.
the next one was to do with township clerk or deputy clerk. This one is kind of an interesting one. When we previously did this bylaw, we didn't have a township clerk. I was the deputy clerk, and Mark was also a deputy clerk. Over time, we have since changed that, but we included deputy clerk and township clerk because for a long period we didn't have a township clerk. Currently, I'm the clerk, and Mark and Suzanne are both deputy clerks, so it kind of covers everything off. At this point, we could remove deputy clerk from the explanation, but if we go back to a time when we don't have a deputy clerk, then that could prove problematic. Or don't have a clerk.
Go ahead, Councilor Richter.
Okay, my query is around the wording of it. So, in my mind, Mark Backen is responsible for corporate administration, period. Like, he's the CAO.
He is the CAO, definitely, but
But this bylaw implies that it's not him who's responsible for corporate administration, and that's where my confusion is arising.
Mr. Backen is responsible for corporate administration and the whole corporation. I am actually responsible for the minutes and
But
the procedures.
I think the issue here is that the definition says assign the responsibility of corporate administration.
So we could update the definition.
Because it is only definitions we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Mr. Backen?
Definition, and it stems from one of the governing acts, charter or local government act.
Green
Because
charter.
actually, it is the provision that there has to be an officer for finance, an officer for records, which is called corporate administration, and then the CAO. And I think that's what this is alluding to.
So can we just maybe insert those words in there or something like that to expand the definition slightly?
We can definitely look at rewording it.
Are we okay with that, Council? Okay. All right, next.
So the next was discussion on unanimous consent, and this would be totally up to council. It's just another tool in the toolbox, as we often say, where if there's a matter of it's informal, we can kind of bypass having to do the whole voting. So motions for extension, other things like that, where the mayor can simply, or the chair can simply ask if anyone has unanimous consent. Now, the key to that is that if the unanimous consent is not there, you automatically go back to a vote. So it's not that you're losing the right to vote on that. You can vote individually. If you don't agree to it, you simply say, no, I don't, and then you have a full vote.
Exactly. Now, that applies even if we extend a meeting then. So
Yes.
if one council doesn't want to, but the vote doesn't have to be unanimous.
No.
Only the consent has to
The
be.
consent has
Yep.
to be unanimous. If it's not, then you have a formal vote.
Which is just a simple majority.
Okay. So the query that I have around this is the whole principle, and the principle in the That's okay. Principle in the sense that this board is the governing body for a multi-million-dollar corporation, and the decisions that this board takes, as it's an elected board, are binding decisions on the corporation. Now, I can see unanimous consent working in a milieu like Metro because it's not an elected board. But in the case of an elected board, this is what I'm querying. Should we be using anything as non-formal as unanimous consent?
And we actually, the things that we currently use it for are very like minor things that are procedural more than that. So do we have an extension? Things like that. We often don't use it for anything which appears on the agenda that actually needs discussion. It's, again, the purview of council.
The definition says immediately it's informal and only used for routine and non-controversial decisions.
Okay, but the issue that I have is the definition of routine and non-controversial decisions, because just about any decision at the council table can be controversial.
Well, then it would not be applied. You would not be using a unanimous consent on anything that was controversial. So the examples given here are simply taking a break or extending the meeting or something like that. So if there's any suggestions, or we can flag it, maybe if somebody wants to make a suggestion for another time, but at the moment, as we're only talking about definitions, it is properly defined as far as I'm concerned. Not that that matters.
My only point for Councilor Richter would be that if it's contentious to any degree, we're not going to be unanimously supporting it. If it's, even though Metro is not duly elected, we still are elected representatives, but all it takes is one board member of Metro to flag something and it's flagged. So I think this would work. Well, you can flag it if you want, but I think it would work the way it's worded.
Well, I'm just putting this as a query in front of the table, whatever the group feels. I mean, these are the rules that bind us as a group. Sure. I'm just raising this as a question because of the fact that we are in charge of a multi-million-dollar corporation. Sure. Now, I'm just one vote. If people don't like it, then or if people don't agree with my position on this, then we continue on with unanimous consent. But if we are going to continue on with unanimous dissent, then we really have to stress the routine and non-controversial. And that means we all have to be on our game if decisions are tried to push through that are controversial using this unanimous consent mechanism.
I don't think that would happen, quite honestly. There's lots of discussion around the council table, and I think if someone tried to push something through, I'm sure out of 9 people, someone's going to see that.
All right. So we can apply it right now. Are we in unanimous consent to carry on? And if not, we could vote on it.
Carry on.
Well, we're in unanimous consent to carry on.
Okay, let's carry on then.
Okay.
There you go.
The next discussion was to do with the rules of procedure, and this particular bylaw also applying to the rules of procedure for the council committees. We could certainly amend the council or the committee bylaw and include their own rules of procedure. I suspect it would be very simple to the meeting rules of procedure for this, but it might make it simpler. Totally up to council whether we do that or not.
Discussion, okay, Councilor Richter.
Well, just based on the committees that I've been on, I would say that because they're chaired by the community co-chair for the most part, a simpler version is needed, just because they don't have the experience or the background in dealing with some of the intricacies of a procedure bylaw, and the simpler we can make it for community members, the better, would be my take on it.
Now,
So
if I could say something here, because I've been on a number of committees too, is we do always have a staff person that is kind of like the clerk, really, of the meeting. And anytime there's a discussion at the meeting, we turn to that person and ask for clarity. And the fact that it's the same procedural bylaw as it is in council makes it in many ways simpler, because you don't have to apply a separate set of rules. But
Well,
Ms. Bauer.
and along that vein, we could create I don't want to say cheat sheet, but a simplified version, which would definitely be supplied to staff and the chairs, which essentially just highlighted the top rules. So you must always have a mover and a seconder. Or I could do something like that was just a simpler, because if I do write it as a bylaw, it's still going to sound like a bylaw and it'll still be more difficult to understand. You'll have to search through it. But if I can come up with just, I don't want to say, like the Coles Notes version,
Yeah,
okay?
that's a good way to phrase it.
Okay, so I will endeavor to come up with a version where they can take it to committees and just have a little bit more understanding.
I mean, they don't get into overly complicated
No.
things, but there are some situations, like, for example, ran into one of the committees not that long ago where they were clearly talking about in-camera information in an open meeting, and they should have recessed into a closed meeting in order to have
point.
deliberations on names.
Now, we can definitely do a simplified version for them and go with that. So
Okay.
moving along to 3.02, which is irregularity. In this case, this is kind of a standard line that goes in a lot of bylaws, and basically it says if we accidentally make a mistake, it doesn't undo what we've done. I would recommend not taking it out, because it does lead to someone being able to try and quash a bylaw for things like, say we start 1 minute late, or say the wrong acting mayor is acting that day, or anything that is not really related to the bylaw you've passed, but could be used to quash it if someone chose to. It's kind of a catch-all.
I get that. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we come back to the definition between what is intended and what actually occurs. And in this case, the concern that I have is around the word unintentional. Who determines that it's unintentional? What is unintentional? If we're going to leave this in, I think we need to define what unintentional is, because sometimes there have been decisions that have been made. I don't know, I'll take as an example wordings in the motions on some minutes in the past where it wasn't exactly what some members of council were called. Now, would you call that an unintentional situation or an intentional situation?
Speaking to the definition, unfortunately, we could cite Webster's version of the of the dictionary as a place to go for definitions or something for non-parliamentary terms. If that's the will of council, that would be our easiest way out. I think to define unintentional, it's up to legislation's written for the assumption that everyone's trying to do the best. So if something's unintentional, it's unintentional. So no one has actually tried to do any harm on purpose. So we could cite the definition of unintentional if that's council's will. As I said, I would it would be not good to lose this clause out of the bylaw as a whole, as it would leave us open to other things.
Could put in parentheses the Webster's dictionary definition of that word.
Sure.
Okay. That would work.
Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I'm just wondering on that, is it necessary for us to include the words unintentional at all? And just say that
It's minor variance?
if it is incorrectly applied, it shall not. I'm not sure if intentional or unintentional, because I don't think we can ever really know I'm assuming mostly it's going to be unintentional, but it is hard to know the actual heart and will of the person.
Yep, that would actually solve the whole problem.
Okay. All right. Councillor Richter, you like that idea?
Yeah, and I hear what Councillor Whitmarsh is saying, but having served under a mayor in the past who incorrectly applied many things, he would claim it was unintentional. Like, to me, when we're putting rules like this together, we have to look at it from the point of view of how could it possibly be abused, as opposed to how are we going to use it? Like, it's how can it be abused? So if that's the case, then let's leave unintentional in, and that sort of handicaps mayors that know full well what they're doing and they're go ahead and do it anyway.
Okay. Councillor Arneson?
Well, my thought about this is that generally speaking, if language has been put forward in such a manner that it's been interpreted already, we'd probably be better to go with that because it has a specific meaning in the law. So if we start messing with the language, it could be inadvertently we're doing something that doesn't have the same standing if somebody was to analyze the situation. So I don't know if unintentionally needs to have a definition there, but one always presumes we're acting in good faith. So that is the de facto presumption. So unintentionally, incorrectly applied, I wouldn't mind if there was a definition, I guess, of unintentionally, but I think it covers off the fact that if you inadvertently make a mistake somehow, that you're not going to be caught, that the whole thing could be quashed just because there's a minor error that obviously wasn't the intention of the council.
All right, so if we change it, there could be unintentional consequences. So let's leave it as it is. Are we happy with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I just thought of an example in this term where we had proceeded with giving third reading at a public hearing, the first time we ever tried it. And then we got into the public hearing, and it was controversial, so we didn't end up giving third reading on that. But we had voted ahead of time to give third reading. Like, is that an unintentional error? Or is that something that could have rebounded legally on us?
I don't think so, in that the motion was never made for third reading. The discussion was, could this be added to the agenda? And the agenda doesn't necessarily make you have to do the reading. Right?
Okay.
So that's not really an issue. And even though we put it forward and say we would like third reading, if it gets here and council says, no, we don't want to do it today, that's fine.
Okay.
My
In that
apologies.
case, let's just put a definition in.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the consensus. But Councillor Whitmarsh, I think I might have pushed the wrong button. Did you want to speak?
I just want to, I guess, again, I don't want to belabor it, but I think whether it's intentional or unintentional, the point of this is that there's an irregularity that happens, and that under the provision of the bylaw, if something gets incorrectly applied, doesn't matter whether they intended to or not, it does not affect the resolution. And I don't think whether they intended to or not, we shouldn't allow that to affect the resolution, because this would imply that if it was intentionally incorrectly applied, that in fact the ability of the resolution is therefore approved or not approved. And so I just think that it shouldn't really matter whether it's unintentional or intentional, and we'll never be able to measure that. I don't care what definition he puts down there, you'll never be able to identify and measure it. So you're making it more complex, and you're never going to be able to actually measure it. So my recommendation would be take unintentional out, because whether it's, as soon as it's incorrectly applied, that's the crux of the matter, not the actual intention.
Okay, so I think we're going to move on, but I think I'd like to mention that any of these changes that we make kind of on the fly will be researched, and if there's an issue with that, we'll come back to council. Is that okay? Because there might be a legal ramification of some kind.
Two different approaches on the table.
It would be great if I could have a direction on that. So council's basically discussing whether we leave the word unintentional in and define it, or whether we remove the word and insert incorrectly applied. I'm fine with either.
I'll move to take unintentional out.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Gunst? Okay, going to clear the clue. Any discussion? Okay, I see empty box, so I'll call the question. Those in favor or opposed, you'd push your buttons. Can we do buttons, or we have to do it by hand?
Buttons, it's B1 on the agenda, so you'll have to enter as...
We're voting actually on keeping it in?
No, we're voting on putting in incorrectly applied. B1, yeah.
Do I have to?
You don't have to do it that way. You can just do it this way, too.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm not in favor. Okay, let's just get this thing clear. All right, so I'm gonna call B1.
Mm-hmm.
Motion B1 and hit that. Is that right? And then we can vote. Yep, there we go. vote complete? This is very complicated. Okay, it fails because Councillor Richter, Long, Woodward, Arneson, and Davis are opposed.
So
Okay.
by default, that would mean that we're going to include the definition of unintentional.
Right.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily follow because that change could also be voted down to leave it as it is.
All right, let's have a discussion about defining the word unintentional. Is there? Yeah, so is there unanimous consent on that or not? Is everybody in favor of that? By unanimous consent, that's done then, if that's all right. Okay, so that's 3.02. Thank you.
Okay. So the next one would be 3.04, terms and parliamentary procedures. Should this state that the procedure specified in Appendix D be followed? My thought on that was Appendix D is not necessarily an exhaustive list, and I'd hate to see us stuck to that list if things change or if there's better terms that come out. Or we do provide the ones in Appendix D as the most used, most often, most convenient, but I wouldn't want to limit to Appendix D.
And there was a typo or something or misspelling in one of them too, Councillor Richter?
Yeah, well, so maybe we should add the word in a glossary of terms and common parliamentary procedures is attached as Appendix D.
Okay. How do we feel about that addition of those words?
Does a glossary exist already?
There is one at the back, yeah.
So you want to just add it to the glossary? Okay, that's fine.
No, it seems that's good.
I think
We're just going to add a few words in.
Is anybody in opposition to that? Okay, then that's passed, and we'll move on,
Okay.
please. Okay, go ahead.
Changes in that, maybe not now that a unanimous consent is still in.
That's fine. When we
Oh,
get
yeah.
to Appendix
When
D,
we
we'll
get to
definitely
those,
look at that.
We can discuss those, okay.
Okay, so 5.01, schedule of meetings. The special closed and the special meetings for public input actually aren't included here as they're not scheduled meetings. They are called by our needs, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Right. Go ahead. Maybe this is the-
Well, I'm having difficulty with that because every single meeting we have a closed meeting.
Not at every single meeting. On almost all special afternoon meetings, but not necessarily.
Not necessarily. We're not required to do so.
We haven't not had one for a while, but we could easily not have one.
Yeah, depends on the actual organization. Some people schedule their special closed and have them as schedule their closed meetings and have them as a separate meeting. The township, in my experience since I've been here, has always just called it a special closed in the middle of the afternoon. That's
And we call them.
Oh, but it's practice, it's what we do, and we're spending a lot of time in special closed. And I think it needs to be acknowledged that that meeting occurs.
But if I
Every
might
Monday,
say,
or
depending
every
who's
Monday meeting.
the mayor at the time and council, there may be situations where there is not one.
Well, then they
And this
change their
procedural
procedure
bylaw will
bylaw.
allow that. But if you put it in, that means there always has to be one.
But when we are asked to approve the council calendar once a year, those special meetings are always included in the council calendar.
no,
that
actually,
we
they're not
approve.
there.
They're not?
They're
No.
not included in the council calendar. As they're special meetings, they're not scheduled. The afternoon, the evening, and the public hearings are. Evening and the public hearings. All the public meetings appear in the calendar.
They're in the council calendar that gets approved as the first order of business for the new council and each year before December.
Right, those three
But
are.
special closed are
Is not scheduled.
They are called at any one of those. I guess it could be at any one of those meetings or just the afternoon meeting. I
Well,
don't
we could
think.
put it anywhere we needed to.
Okay, everybody clear on that?
Nope.
Okay, well,
I still don't understand why we're not acknowledging we have closed meetings.
Councilor Arneson?
Yes, thank you. My thought about that is that we should have a place marker for having that meeting, even if we don't have any content, because that way we have the continuity. So if you think something might be coming up in that meeting and we know that there could be something in that meeting, but when we deal with it on a practical level, we go through the afternoon, and then if there's no closed agenda items, but we at least would have identified that generally, if there was something to be discussed, it would be at that meeting. That's just my thought.
Well, may I say on item C, it's always there, resolve into special close. I suppose if there wasn't going to be a closed meeting, would that still be there and would say that there's no business?
We wouldn't include it at all.
Okay, so the placeholder is item C. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Mr.
it is
Backer.
one of the topics that's, or one of the topics that's in the list of topics we can put in the afternoon agenda. If we did not have a special closed meeting, we just wouldn't include that topic.
Wendy,
That could happen.
there's two implications, I think. The one implication we're talking about is having the need to go into the special closed. Right now, there is no need. We don't have to have it. It's not part of the procedural bylaw. If we actually put it in, then we have to go into it and then have a nullity of a meeting and then come out of it. That's the first challenge. The second challenge, though, is by having it enshrined, it may limit the flexibility, and we haven't done this, I don't believe, to have a closed meeting on the fly, which would take unanimous consent. But if an issue arose in the evening, for example, it would in theory be possible then to say, we're going to adjourn to a closed meeting to address that topic and come back into the regular meeting, which could be an emergent issue. That could also be complicated by it. I believe that's why most places aren't actually scheduling their closed. They're actually leaving this flexibility open. Is that correct?
That's happened at Metro quite a number of times. Okay, Councillor Anderson, were you finished? Yeah. Okay, and then we have Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I just, Mr. Backham brought the flexibility thing there. I think we should just leave it alone. It gives. If we don't, we don't. If we schedule it in here, then we all have to get up and have a cookie and come back. And I'm just, yeah, I think it gives staff more flexibility to either take it in. I think I can only remember one special meeting since 2011, maybe two, that we've had. Well, no, that's not applying here. No. I think I'm wondering if we should just leave it the way it is.
Okay, and Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there could be, under 5.01, there's two statements there. I wonder if we just had a third statement that said something along the lines of that at times a special closed meeting and a special closed meeting for public input may be called or something, or maybe
scheduled.
Maybe scheduled. So it just indicates that we do have them and that we do meet, but they're not actually part of the regular schedule, and at times they might be there, and still leaves a flexibility, but gives us allows it to be stated that they do happen.
They actually are still in the bylaw, just under types of meetings.
Okay.
Okay, they're just called special closed meetings of council in section 5.12. We don't have a definition for public input. It would just be considered a specific type of special meeting, but we could definitely add that definition.
I see. Okay. Well, I mean, it's helpful to have it in 5.12, but I mean, it would be as simple as a little sentence that just said at times they are called or something. Anyways, thanks.
Okay, that sounds good. Councillor Richter, are you all right?
Yeah,
with that?
I want to build on that, and because we're seeing in the second one, the agenda for the regular council public hearing may also include other non-public hearing related items. So to build on what Councillor Whitmarsh said, at the end of the first one, councillors' meeting schedule shall include regular council afternoon, regular council evening, and regular council public hearing. Can we add a sentence in that says regular afternoon and evening meetings may include a special closed session? Leaving it as the may. Does it capture what?
Okay. Are we okay? Is everyone okay with that? Any objections? Then we're moving on. Excellent.
So is this a unanimous consent?
No objections to that.
See how well unanimous consent
Look how well it's working.
Well,
And some
council
advantages.
priorities anyway.
But we're going to run out of time. Let's keep going.
Okay, so moving down to 5.05, advertising availability of regular council meeting schedule. This, again, is going right back to the community charter. It's part of section 127.1b and 94.2, We could actually even just remove the section altogether as it is a duplication. Calendars are just for open and transparency. We have to put it in the newspaper, which we do. That's what we're required to do. We also have the council calendar up online, which Suzanne graciously keeps up to date. Amazingly, just an amazing job at it. And it is, and it is also posted downstairs. So the two next months are always posted downstairs for people to come in and take a look.
So could we just add the public posting place as well on there? Public
we could,
notice
we
posting
could add
place?
the public notice place is there. We could also put, same as the public notice
Well,
place.
it's not in 5.05, but it is on 5.06A.
506. We could add the website, definitely. It would be just, it's not necessary, but definitely could add it.
Okay, so in 5.05, we could add the public posting, notice posting place, which includes website.
Yeah.
Okay, are we all happy with that? Excellent.
And website.
Okay.
Okay. The next conversation was to do with the location of the meetings. The current bylaw does say that a regular meeting of council must be held at this facility, unless by resolution council approves an alternate location. The suggestion was made that we formalize having to go to the other neighborhoods in Langley. At this time, council can actually instruct us to go there by motion anyway. Just if you decided we wanted to go someplace, we take it on the road. My only proviso to that is, let's face it, the room has what we need. If we do go on the road, we likely won't be able to web stream. We likely won't have an audio. There'll be some logistics, but we definitely could do it. The discussion is whether you'd like to enshrine it in the bylaw, or is it just left as something that council can direct as council sees fit?
So currently, we can direct at any time, and
Yeah.
I think that's what happened in the past. Enshrining it, have those other problems. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, well, Councillor Long, you'll remember this too, because this occurred under Mayor Alberts. And we did it, I think, for all of one term, where May was in Walnut Grove and October was in Alder Grove, and so
yeah.
we went to those communities so
but,
that the communities could have direct access to us. That's what I liked about it, but I wasn't aware that we would lose web streaming, and web streaming I know is used a lot by a lot of people.
So, and my recollection of that was there was those added benefits of touring of the township, but we didn't really have a home. So we had to sort of make shift every time we met anyway, because we're meeting the school board offices.
Yeah.
And we didn't have streaming to worry about. Cable 10 used to come in, and Cable 10 used to follow us around, actually, if we went to somewhere else. But now that's all in the past.
They're all gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So if it's, I wonder if we should add a sentence in here then that council can resolve to.
It says right there,
Actually,
by
it doesn't include
resolution, council approves an alternate location.
Unless
So-
by resolution, council approves an alternate location.
Okay.
So it's already in there.
You can tell us to go where we need to go.
All right.
Okay, we're
Okay.
going to move on. Thank you.
So the next is the discussion to do with the council start times. Currently, in order to kind of manage the flow of information or manage the flow of the meetings, and some of them are longer than others, it's left to staff to determine when the meeting's going to start, which essentially means we decide when we take a look at the agenda and see how big it is. The suggestion is made that we go to a 3 o'clock start for the afternoon meeting, a 7 o'clock start for the evening meeting, and a 9 o'clock start for the public hearing, all of which is doable. My only caution would be if we start at 3 o'clock, we may have more of the meetings that wrap around that we end up having to finish in the evening. The regular council evening, again, we may end up running right up to the 9 o'clock meeting if things are long, which would mean, again, we'd have to wrap around till after the public hearing. Totally doable. It's just a matter of how we want to manage the meetings.
All right, this one could involve a lot of discussion, so I think we need to be very specific about what changes we want to make, perhaps, and discuss
Yeah,
them.
and maybe we should just have a preface discussion about it. I mean, the fallout, of course, is how the wording in these sections go. But from my perspective, I'm not finding starting at noon and finishing at midnight an effective meeting schedule, period. It's just not working for me. And I don't think by the time we get to midnight, we're making good decisions anymore. I don't even think by the time we get to 10 p.m., we're making good decisions anymore. I also don't think it's fair when we post a public hearing that's going to be on the same night with a regular meeting that we don't start the public hearing until 11 p.m. So, I mean, it's probably going to be more inconvenience for staff and council members if we have to adjourn meetings to the next evening in order to be completed. But I think we need to be looking here, from my perspective anyway, is how do we ensure that we are making the best possible decisions for the community because we're all not exhausted and are all paying attention to making the best possible decisions.
Okay, to
So
move,
that's the background to this, and I agree with you, Councillor Long. I don't think this is going to be a quick discussion. We may want to flag it and go
all
back
right, but
to
one way we could try and approach this is there's basically 3 sections here. There's the start time on 2 of the meetings, but the one that we're on right now, which is 5.09, is the ending of a meeting, the afternoon meeting, which has been changed to 6:30 a few years ago. I remember it being 6, Councillor Richter, maybe you do too, or 6:15 rings a bell.
Yes.
But somewhere along the line, we changed it to 6:30, and that's what this 5.09 does. So do you
But
want to
now
start
we're
with?
getting like 20-minute dinner breaks. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
so can we deal with that now, and then we're going to go with 5.10 and 5.11 in terms of the other meetings. But what do you want to do about the afternoon meeting ending at 6:30? Are we going to leave it at that, or does someone want to make a change?
Yeah, I'll move that we ended at 6.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to, how do we do this now? We have a motion. Shall we let everybody speak first? Maybe we should, because I don't know how to make the button work. So there is a motion pending. Any discussion?
Okay,
beyond that?
you press my button?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. The problem that on the amendment, no, it's not an amendment, is if we're 5 minutes away or 10 minutes away, and we've got to compound that up. It's kind of nice to have the mayor or all of council say, hey, you know what? Look, we got 6 things left. We're never going to get it done. But then that's going to add on to the night. So there's that.
Okay,
That's
so-
just on the amendment. Anyhow,
Yeah, so on this one, it does still say that there's unanimous consent required or a resolution passed to extend the meeting. So no matter what time we pick, council will always have the ability to change the time. But right now, we're debating, or will be debating in a minute, changing it from 6:30 to 6.
okay. So the way it is right now, the mayor says, can I have an extension?
No, councillor has to. Well, the mayor might call for it, sure. Somebody will.
But then he's asking for an extension, but we always seem to be able to do it. Nobody ever seems to vote against it. So, no, but we've always had that opportunity to do that.
Well, what's going to happen one day is there'll be no dinner, because if we extend past 6:30 2 or 3 more times, then it's going to be, eating a sandwich during the meeting, which
Yeah.
might be fine.
Okay, that.
So by moving it to 6, I guess there's more opportunities to extend it reasonably.
8 to 6? Sorry, I missed you there.
It's at 6:30 currently in the bylaw, and the discussion is going to be around moving it to 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it complicates things on the other end, too.
Oh, yeah, there's that about it. So who's up now? Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I thought for sure, I'm looking over here, staff, I thought this thing was broken. I was going to ask David Davis for a Phillips screwdriver because I was going to fix this thing.
Carry on.
Anyway, yeah, I felt 3 times I've asked to speak and I haven't been able to. I'm sorry, Councillor Davis. But do you have a Phillips screwdriver though? Anyway, I think I'm going to stick with 6:30 because something comes up and
Yeah, we haven't got a
need to
motion
get
yet,
through.
so let's just keep moving
Okay.
until we have the motion.
We did have a motion. Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson.
All right, so I'm going to clear the queue, and I'm clearing the queue, and let's speak to the motion now then. All right, sorry, Councillor Anderson, I know you're trying to go here. You're on anyway. Okay, so we're speaking to the motion. It's been moved by Councillor Richter, seconded by Councillor Arneson, to change it to 6. We've
Yeah.
had some discussion already. Councillor Arneson?
Yeah, well, just quickly, I think that if we have a definitive time, then we can always extend it from there. But the problem is if it's at 6:30 and you're trying to get a few more items in, this is where we run into a problem. So if we start the discretion at 6 o'clock to add some time on there, I think it's more fair than starting at 6:30, because I do agree that we need to have a reasonable amount of time just to have a break from deliberations, and it's reasonable for us to do that. So, and if there's extra items at the end, we may have to consider what else we need to do about our agendas, so they're not so lengthy.
Back in.
Mr. Chair, I totally agree with the process you're going through in terms of trying to identify them, but these can cause complications because you have to look at the situation in its totality. So while it may be very wise to take this approach, just a broader scope in terms of the consideration should be made before any decisions are made. So for example, reference was made to CPC. That's one of the reasons we're starting at 12 or 1 o'clock. Usually that's going to take us till about 2 o'clock. Those are our referred or deferred meetings of council, if you will. The situation with that may be simply to meet on another day with CPC or another Monday. As we begin to condense the meeting schedules, and it doesn't really affect this one because it's only a matter of taking it from 6:30 to 6 and being able to extend it. As you begin to condense that meeting schedule, it simply means more meetings have to occur. We've been trying to assist council in trying to, police some of the times we've been going through in the hope that may compress some of the discussions, and I don't think it's been very successful so far, and we're looking at other techniques, perhaps putting times in the agenda to give some guidance or something, because we seem to get lost in the timing. But the intent of where we're going may simply be that we're going to have more meetings on different days. Not specifically this motion, but as we go through the next several, keep in mind that it seems that there is more time needed for meetings, and the question is, when do we do them? On the Mondays, or on every Monday, or on other days of the week, Tuesdays, for example, as was suggested. For us, it all works fine, but it's for council. They have to consider what's going to be the most effective in terms of the best decisions they seek to make.
Thanks, Mr. Backen. And there are unintentional consequences on all the decisions. But by doing this right now, we're just talking about the 6:30. So those points will come up on the next discussion, I'm sure. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I think I appreciate Mr. Backen's comments, and was going to make some similar kinds of comments. But I think on this particular item of 6 or 6:30, I do think that the 6 o'clock probably makes the most sense. Because we could have the opportunity to extend it, and we likely will. And, so it does give us a little bit more flexibility to extend meetings. It also makes it sets in the mindset that we're trying to finish by 6, and so it might limit some of our long-winded conversations that aren't necessary if we try and push it for 6 and rather than 6:30. And I think council is certainly guilty at times of long-winded conversations that could be shortened.
Fair comment. Councillor Woodward?
Volunteer Councillor Whitmarsh to speak less during meetings. Yeah. So, but I think for me, I don't need an hour to eat dinner. So if we're here to get business done, I don't know why we wouldn't meet till 6:30, and then just understand that the meeting will end at 6:30 and not go to 6:40 or 6:45. But for me, I don't need an hour to eat food. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Richter?
Okay, if we're going to leave it at 6:30, then we need to strike unless council members present unanimously consent or adopt to extend. If it's 6:30, it's 6:30, period. End of discussion. I like the idea of putting it at 6 and giving ourselves the flexibility to take it to 6:30 if we need to.
Fair enough. So we have a fallback if this fails then. So I'm going to call the vote unless anybody else wants to speak. No, then I'll call the vote on 6:30. Changing 6:30 to 6. My apologies. Vote complete, I guess. Nothing's happening. Oh, I had to call it the number. Oh, darn. Okay, so B2, I guess. There we go. All right. There it is. Okay, so it passes with Ferguson, Woodward, and Davis opposed. Is that correct? All right, it's good. We're moving on. So now we've got real trouble. So we're going to go to 5.10, which is that the council meeting ends at 10.
I actually am going to make a suggestion that we kind of put aside the times the meetings will start till we get to a discussion about what meetings are going to be when. Would be a better way.
All right. Okay,
Okay.
are we all right with that? So then,
I'm needing
ahead.
clarification on
Okay.
that.
Well, it seems that maybe a larger discussion needs to be held about whether meetings are going to be on the Mondays or whether we're going to be adding days.
Yeah, and the other thing is, in these specific resolutions, the terminology are, shall start at the time set by the clerk, deputy clerk, or designated staff person. No, I think we should have specific start times. But this is a broader discussion. Maybe we should flag this and come back to it.
I think that's what you're saying, right, Mr.
Yeah.
Bell?
Well, the discussion goes around 5.10 and 5.111. And I guess the discussion is, if we have specific start times, that's going to affect how much we can put into an agenda, which would therefore result in more meeting dates necessary. Because as it is now, what we do is if there's a heavy agenda, staff takes a look at the agenda and backs the time up a little bit so we can get everything done. But if we're going to say we're going to start at 3 o'clock or 2:30, on times when the agendas are heavier, we wouldn't conclude the information.
Well, the suggestion is that we flag that and come back for a separate discussion
Maybe
about
deal with
start
some of the other
times.
ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
See how many we can get through first.
right, but, Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, we should clarify that before that previous vote, because I think that would have been good to have that clear, that now when you see a document, council procedure bylaw, that says we end at 6, you're going to plan the agenda to end at 6, and then potentially, if that adds up over the year, half an hour here, half an hour there, now we're coming in on an additional day to meet again, when maybe that wouldn't have been necessary. Thanks.
All right, then I think we should all be aware that when we come back for discussion, and don't forget, this is council priority, so it has to be passed by council anyway. But good point, Councillor Woodward, that when we come back to this discussion about start times, there could be another amendment to the finish time as well. Are we all clear on that? Although not really. So at another future meeting, I guess, or something with that?
So, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I think all Wendy was suggesting was that if we're going to start talking about start and end times of meetings, we should decide what days the meetings are on. And I think I would advocate that we use the next half hour or so to start that discussion, because that's in effect the foundation of everything that follows. So I think what she's saying is between 5:1 and 5:11, we can begin by talking about the scheduling of regular council meetings and going down from that section, and then start about the times afterwards. So we're really dealing with section 5, but now we're going to focus on regular afternoon and evening meetings. When do you wish to hold them?
Okay.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. So Councillor Richter, why don't you lead the discussion?
So
then?
so we're discussing this now. We're just going
Yeah,
to use the
that's-
rest of
that's
our
what
time
staff
to
would
work
like, yeah.
through this one. Okay. I really don't like the idea that meeting start times change, meeting to meeting. I think we should have set times. I don't think it's fair to the public that want to be here if, one day we're starting the afternoon meeting at 2 and the next day we're starting at 3 and the day or the next meeting after that it's at noon.
Today's 2:30. Yeah,
We're starting at 3:30?
2:30 today. isn't it?
2:30 today.
2:30, okay. I think we should have set start times. And I don't know what is causing this issue in terms of the timing of meetings, but I will say and Councillor Long, you've seen it too, and probably Councillor Ferguson as well, we seem to be trying to cram more information into fewer meetings. And that's what's leading to the backup time, like the long meetings. And I just don't understand why we should only have 2 meetings a month. If we need 3 meetings a month, we should be doing 3 meetings a month. Maybe what we should do is have the 3rd meeting of the month would be CPC and delegations. And then we could get delegations off the agenda for the other 2 meetings a month, and the public then knows that we have 1 standing meeting a month where we're going to start with CPC, and right after that we're going to feed into delegations. And anyone can come and talk to us on any topic, even if it's outside our jurisdiction. I mean, that's one option.
Okay,
That's
let's hear
right.
some more discussion. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think I remember when I started my first term, I remember us having this conversation about meetings and how often we met, and I think there was a at least I understood that there was a decision made to hold meetings less often, that we'd go to twice a month instead of maybe 3 or 4 times a month, which I think was held before I started. And you know, I can totally appreciate that they're very long days, but I also recognize that the work that we do as counselors is far more than just attending meetings. In fact, the time we spend at meetings is probably the smallest amount of time that a counselor spends. I think they're spending time in the community, meeting with people, they're at events, they're on phone calls, they're doing all sorts of things that have nothing to do with our regular meetings. And so for me, you know, I would probably prefer that we continue in a pattern somewhat similar to what we're doing. I would rather, since once we're already here to meet. I'd rather get through the material and meet on that and continue to be focused on it, as opposed to having meetings more often because we find the day just too long. And you know, for some on council, they have other jobs they're doing and besides council, and I think it's helpful to have the meetings longer and less frequent in those cases. And I think we have to be cognizant of the fact of that fact. It's one of the reasons why I like the idea of the 6 o'clock start, because for me, I'd rather have a longer day but have a bit more of a break in the middle of the day, and know I have that break time in the middle of a long day. If we're going to start having meetings every week, then sure, I don't need an hour to eat supper either. It wasn't about eating supper; it was about spending some time just away from the deliberations and on a long day. So I like it how it is. I don't think I like the flexibility of the staff being able to decide when we should start meetings. I feel it's worked fairly well, and so I'd like to hear more from other people, but I haven't been dissatisfied with the way it's been going.
Thank you. Councilor Davis?
Thank you. I have a couple of things. I have a hard time getting here, it's earlier, and not everyone does. And I have a hard time keeping my eyes open at 11 o'clock or 11:30. That is one thing, and I don't. My legs puff up when I'm here. I sit too long. So, but that said, I think the flexibility of staff to put this stuff in a meeting, it's not their fault. It comes down, it's presented to staff, and they've got to make, you guys have to make it happen. So you do need a little bit of flexibility. Okay. I do, and I'm not going to be cheeky on the long-winded comment, Councillor Whitmore, but when I get my agenda on Thursday, I start to go through it Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and I get, when I sit down here, I feel more comfortable knowing what and a lot of things I've already written on, opposed, in favor. But there are lots of times, not lots of times, but there are times where other input from everybody else, I think, oh, I never thought of that. I got to do that. So I changed my vote. So, geez, I am getting long-winded. I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about.
We hear you.
But I guess what I'm saying is I don't think I want to come 3 times or 4 times. I'll come if the meeting is going to be half the length and we meet every Monday. But I'm just wondering if that does cost, if we meet every Monday, staff have to scramble a little bit to get a meeting done. Mind you, maybe there's going to be half as much, but they still have to get that meeting done in a shorter time frame. I guess just to wrap this up, there are pros and cons to it, but I'm pretty flexible. I can do either way, but I do start to fall asleep at about 11 o'clock. Thanks.
All right. Councillor Ferguson, you're up next.
Councillor Davis, I'll remember that to get a sneak a motion through at 11:35. Folks, I've heard this discussion over the years, and it's very interesting to note these discussions. And to Mayor Frose's credit, this meeting the way it is right now, watch it from sitting in the audience. I think it was a very good idea, and also there's other things that councillors can do and staff can do rather than meeting all the time, but also getting the community's work done. Now, having said that, this term, here we come in, and it happens to all of us as the years go by, as the terms go by. The very first thing we come up with is some issues that are of paramount importance. Boom, right off the bat, we come in, walk in, we've got the quality in, which is a huge issue there. We've got the tree bylaw, which is a huge issue. We've got some other special closed stuff. All of a sudden, this council gets posed with a whole bunch of stuff, and we've seen it over the years as a first term. I hope that this first year will get some things done. I understand probably development business is slowing down. Things will begin to gradually slow down. We'll get the major issues off the table, and we'll be able to proceed accordingly. And I like the 6 o'clock if we can, but I know that it might move to 6:15 or sometime 6:25, 6:30. Continue on and move, and I believe that things will slow down because a lot of the major issues now have been dealt with. We've still got a few more. We've got a few more months to work through this first year term, but I really believe that we have, to our own fault, and I'm one of them, a notice of motion. I know I've got one coming up tonight, and I've had one in the past. Notices of motions come up. They take time. Delegations come forward. Some delegates, I'm not sure if we're even aware, they're over an hour. Some people come, they're a delegation, and we start asking questions. They're over an hour. Sometimes there's a presentation, it's over an hour. Sometimes we open the mural, really, really good. That ended up being, I think, an hour and 15 minutes. So sometimes meeting times get chewed up. I really hope that we can continue on with the process we have right now and reevaluate maybe in October and see, do we need to make changes as far as meeting more, or is it working or not? That's my belief. I don't want to see the schedule change right now, but some of it's my own fault, talking too much and also too many notices of motion and too much. That's just my point. Thank you.
Councillor Arneson?
Thank you. Having deliberated with the rest of council in my first term about this very important topic, it occurs to me as we sort of regurgitate some of these same ideas that come out, what really bothers me about this discussion is I have not heard yet once an objective consideration of what's in the public interest in terms of meeting. Is there a point in which people become unable or less able to make good decisions after a certain amount of time? And I put this in the context of receiving a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So compressed information, and then a few days to consider and digest that, and then to deliberate it. But if you, for me, put those things together, what's missing in this discussion is I don't think we've had an objective assessment about what constitutes what would be reasonable for us to consider. Because otherwise, I can add my voice and say, well, I don't mind meeting every Monday, that'd be fine with me. But that would be probably self-serving. So we've all got our own lens about what would work or what wouldn't work. And I think it's more important to look at what is the end game. To me, the end game is to make sure that we are making good decisions. And if it's impactful, that our meetings are too long or we're not getting our information in a timely manner, whatever it is, a combination of those things, that's what I want to determine, not whether or not I would personally be inconvenienced or not if I had to meet, extra meetings every other Tuesday. So to me, that's the starting point for the discussion. And I think we should actually pay more attention to that aspect of it, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere just by talking about, self-referential information about what works for. And it's not to say it's not viable information. Of course, we all have schedules and we have to balance things. But I think it's most important to think about what makes good public policy.
Thank you. And Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, so I would just like, as the token new person, along with Councillor Woodward, there is a lot of information, and for us to digest this all in a few days and then have a huge stack of issues to go through all on a Monday. Could we know that after, say, we miss a holiday, maybe we haven't had a meeting for a month, that it's going to be a bigger package? Could we not then, maybe make the decision to like have a day following that date, just to have it, reserve it? So say there's maybe 2 or 3 days in the year where we know that we may need those extra days, instead of like legislating that we're going to do this every other Monday, or it seems that there's maybe 3 or 4 times a year where there's heavier agendas, as opposed to some other weeks. I don't know. That's just a suggestion, that maybe recognizing that, yes, we do have those very busy ones, that we can maybe add an extra day a couple times a year.
All right, thanks. Mr. Mackin, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief, but there's a lot of good topics being discussed. So first, I guess, some history, then a bit of the principles we use to set the agenda, and then the things that we view as being important. Historically, Council would be probably interested to know that, back in 1996, 1999, the afternoon sessions would start at 4 o'clock and usually be done by about 9 o'clock. The difference, though, I think, was it was a much smaller community at that point, and I think the biggest change has been revolving around such things as public input and notices of motion, whether they drive the public input or whether they don't. And when I say notices of motion, I don't mean simply self-created ones. Quite often a notice of motion is in response to someone coming to council, or a piece of input that's coming forth that's deemed to require some action or activity. So we're looking at a different situation from then as to now. As we try to deal with the agenda then, we go back to first principles in terms of, well, what's the most important? You may be interested to know that way back then, the order of the agenda was very different than it is now. Right now, we recognize that the bylaws are perhaps the most important part, because each bylaw has a lengthy history of an issue, public consultation, public input, council deliberation, and a result. And most councils, and I mean this in terms of in the region, most councils spend the majority of their time on those topics in terms of the bylaw debate, deliberation, as there's a lot of big topics that can be discussed. So as we form the agenda then, being respectful of the past and looking at what the issues are, we try to look at the time and use council's time wisely. And that's why there's a flexibility as to starting time. And we try to fit that into the program that seems to work. The reason for the 2-week split is because that allows for publication of the public hearings that need to be processed from one meeting to the next. If we go to a 2-1-2, for example, then we sometimes miss the public hearing opportunity because you can't get the publications out in time. So there is some benefits, and of course those can be achieved by a bit of a cost, which is scheduling further meetings that can actually help to balance the process. So as we go forward then, we look at the timing in terms of the best use of council, and we look at the core meetings. The one thing that does come up in terms of the viewing that's taking time, as was said and was suggested by Councillors Richter and Ferguson, and hearing Councillor Arneson, is that we do tend to try to schedule a lot of public input or notices of motion regarding public input or public engagement or council workshops then on council Mondays. And one option would be, as was said, to schedule those on other days, the third Monday or another Monday of the month, trying to collapse some of those down. That might be practical because where we view ourselves as being overburdened is in those key areas. Now, as we go forward then, we also try to take some of the burden off of the notices of motion by way of some sort of priority or directional settings that we have. We've noted that I think term to date, we've had 48 notices of motion come forward. That's not a bad thing. It just means that our priorities sometimes aren't aligned with what's coming up. What we see coming up, though, are usually responses to public issues that are arising at the time. So it's not things that our priorities and may not be long-term corporate priorities. They instead might be reacting to public input or public concerns on the fly basis. There's nothing wrong with that if that's council's will or direction. That is more typical of smaller communities. Larger communities tend to actually have a bigger, grander agenda that they seek to work on. So that causes some of the complications. So I give you that background in terms of the process and the history and the way we're headed, because it really depends upon which way council wants to go in terms of the direction, of the short days, the long days, and the relative importance. We're keeping in mind, though, as Councillor Arneson referenced, the principle, though, is that the bylaws are the most important thing because of the history that each one of those has. The rest of it is still important, but the bylaws are what keeps the organization functioning. Wendy, did I miss anything?
All right, so currently we are not proposing any changes. We've had a good discussion. does council want to continue to the next item and not make a change, or do you want to, someone want to propose a change? Okay. Councilor Richter?
What I'd like to propose is that we have a third Monday or other day, but a third meeting a month. And just try it out, maybe not change the bylaw, but try it out and see how it works for a couple of months, where we have a third day, and what we do is CPC as well as delegations. So all those public things that people keep bringing to us, it just goes on to that day. And that way the clerk can say, no delegations, we've got this day. Because larger communities, you're right, Mr. Back, and larger communities don't take delegations at every meeting. They have a day set aside for delegations. And maybe that is the direction that we should move in.
Could I just ask for some clarification if we do that? My concern would be currently delegations can come forward on agenda items. If we were to say you can only come on the middle Monday,
But that's
would we
an
still
item
be
that needs to be discussed.
Yeah,
because I
okay.
don't
So long
like
as
the
you
restrictions
that
are
would
on
be
that.
my
Because I had the same concerns. Can we at least leave it at this moment about potentially another meeting a month for CPC, and then let the delegations thing?
Yeah, but
rest for a
maybe
minute.
what we want to do is try it and see if it works. When I first started the job, the expectation was you had a meeting every friggin' Monday. That was it. That was the expectation. Mondays were council days, period. I had to change my teaching schedule. I had to say, no, I can't teach on Mondays anymore because Mondays are council. And then it went down to 3, and then it went to 2, and the 2 is not working. The 3 was more balanced, but I can see us maybe not wanting to have, maybe we want to stick with having a regular afternoon and a regular evening twice a meeting, but start pushing some of like the presentations and all that stuff, push it off to the separate day.
Okay, let's just have some more discussion about this, but I don't see it in the procedural bylaw that there is a part that covers CPCs anyway, right? Am I right?
That would be in the procedure bylaw, but they're scheduled at the call of the chair or as needed. So there's no definite time.
So this concept of having one additional meeting can be done without having to
Special
change
meetings
it.
for the point of this year. If we tried that, we could make them as special meetings and not have to alter the calendar.
Mr. Backen?
To elaborate, I think the assumption would be if someone wished to speak on a matter that was before council where they could, so prior to the public hearing, then council could entertain those delegations in the evening, but presentations or delegations on extraneous matters then or public input on general topics should be done outside of the evening meeting. They should be done on the special night, so to speak. So I think the premise would actually be that we would likely begin to see the third meeting in the afternoon as perhaps being the CPC, and with the evening, or maybe it's the afternoon as well, would be the delegations, presentations, and perhaps even some motions that may arise from delegations and presentations, or a venue for further discussion of the notices of motion, because they are being also embedded in a lot of the bylaw work, if you will, that may be causing some of the complexities, and they may need more time than is available. So you begin to take that night out and recognize that it's got a different purpose behind it, which is effectively, I would say, public engagement, public input, something of that nature, where you can actually focus those things that are related to public complaints and inputs. Policy matters, a big policy matter probably should be on the regular agenda, but if it's a policy response to someone, for example, a policy on what a tree bylaw should look like, certainly fits in the regular process. But if someone's complained about the application of the tree bylaw because trees were cut down, it's probably something that should be on that other night. Now there's a judgment call to make, but then at least you're dividing the work up a bit more effectively.
Okay, Councilor Davis?
Thank you. Could it be have 4 meetings a year instead of every month? But then I think, no, that wouldn't work. Well, why wouldn't that work? Instead of having 3 meetings, because you're going to have 12 extra meetings, and I just don't know about
Necessarily, because we don't meet in August, but I think that's right. The concept being instead of 10 more meetings a year, it might be 6 meetings a year or whatever. Because I think the concept that Councilor Richter said is at some additional meetings, possibly a third one a month.
I'm sorry. I understood that it was
Well, you did say third one a month, Councilor Richter, but maybe that could be explored into one every 2 months, or whenever required.
Yeah, it's just that we need to have a third meeting a month. instead of trying to jam everything into 2 meetings, we need a third to put the overflow stuff into.
So my recollection is that CPC used to be at the call of the chair, and it was a separate meeting from what, if I remember correctly, and it was often on, well, always on and off Monday. Is that right? So that's a concept.
Oh,
we're
but you
discussing
can't,
now.
pardon me, you can't have it the call of the chair. It's got to be,
Well, it's called the chair is a
staff.
term saying that it's a special meeting.
Scheduled as needed.
It's not scheduled ahead of time. It's scheduled when needed.
So
That's the call of the chair.
To elaborate, Mr. Chair, right now it's at the call of the chair, but the chair has said effectively, pick the days where we can have a full council. The only days we can really get a full council on most occasions is when we have another meeting scheduled. So when we try to go to the off meetings, for example, it's very difficult because people have engagements, they've made plans.
Yeah.
It has to be scheduled at the beginning. So I mean, that's where it would be much more easy.
All right. Councillor Davis, anything else?
that's good.
Okay. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. Some good ideas coming forward. I'm wondering on this, if we were to have a third meeting, is it possible for us to, I know we talked in the afternoon having CPC, is it also possible for us to consider having one of the special closed meetings of the month moved to that day as well? So we could have a CPC and then go into a special closed, leaving the other 2 regular days, because special close isn't scheduled anyways, just simply for an afternoon and an evening meeting without a special closed added. Because it does seem to me where we are spending considerable time in our discussions is in special close, and they seem to go for a long period of time and they push to the end. And so I'm wondering if we were to do a CPC special closed on that third Monday, and then one of the other Mondays would only be afternoon meeting, afternoon, evening. I'm just wondering if that flexibility would be open to us.
We would have to be a bit creative because to enter into a closed meeting, you must have a regular council meeting or some form of council meeting. A committee of the whole meeting, which is CPC, would not constitute that. So we'd have to actually rework it a little bit in terms of the process, so it can be achieved. It just may have different labels on it.
Right. So it could be an afternoon meeting with the only agenda being special closed.
Correct.
And CPC.
And CPC is committee of the whole, or we could simply go to afternoon meetings and have this forum become not a committee of the whole, but an actual council meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. We used to have council priority meetings. We used to even call it something else, but what happened is a lot of times not all councillors came. And sometimes even hard getting quorum, and also we had a tough time having agenda items. Now, that's all changing now, and we're getting more stuff referred in it ended up being a good working thing. I understand what council is doing right now as far as adding some more meetings, but I still believe we're a few months away, well, 6, but whatever October it is. I would like to review this at the 1 year stage, because I can't see us having too many more long meetings between. I just can't. Maybe today, other than today, I can't speak today, but today it could be our own fault though. But anyway, that's just my personal, and that might, those kind of things, even if we went 3 or 4 times a month, that wouldn't change the fact that we wouldn't have a midnight meeting. We still might get we still might have scuds in our agenda stuff.
Okay, so
anyway,
so council, we're approaching the end of this meeting, and we do have to finish because we have a scheduled meeting at 2:30. So I suppose we should adjourn this discussion, or does anyone have a suggestion? Because go ahead.
I know that I've raised this before about the need to perhaps have, I'm going to say Gord McIntosh, but maybe another consultant, to work with us on reviewing or coming up with some solutions about this meeting thing. I wonder if that's still a viable option to look at.
So perhaps we should adjourn this, and with that thought, that at the end of the meeting, we've been discussing meeting schedule and frequency of meetings. Can we come back at another meeting with some suggestions or some help in moving us through that process, Mr. Backen?
I think we could. I think we simply have to decide when we wish to adjourn this meeting to. And I agree we should adjourn it because of the time of the day we have. So would it be to the next slot, which would be, or another day for the CPC? Because as you can see, there's lots of discussion on this topic. So,
well, when is the next CPC schedule?
It would be the last Council Monday in July. At this point, it was going to be for the political sign bylaw, but we have a few years to bring that in, so we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
move that one along.
So that would be the suggestion. Councillor Woodward, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, is it possible, since the CPC can be called at the discretion of the chair, that maybe we could have CPC meetings every Monday until at least the council procedure bylaw item is dealt with? And maybe we have a chance of now getting it done here in the summer, rather than this going on literally until 2020, it feels like to me. Some way to wrap this up, if there's some way to do that. Just keep having these meetings until this is done. Thanks.
Up to the availability council.
Okay, the next, I don't know.
Can I clarify?
Yeah, please do.
Because I thought you said earlier that CPC is called at the,
Call of the chair, yes, but
so Mayor
it
Froese
would-
could call one every Monday
he
until
could
this
call
is,
one every Monday.
until this is
I
done.
would try and ensure before we did that we would have quorum.
Councillor Woodward may not have been here. The standing rule we have from the mayor is that we have to have a full council. So as we begin to schedule for the Mondays, we have to then call and see who's available on the Mondays. And quite often people have other matters because they weren't scheduled at that
Oh,
time.
I'm sorry, I should clarify, not every Monday where there's a council meeting, as
Oh, I
opposed
see.
to once a month. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so help us out then.
No, we generally don't schedule CPC for the first meeting of the month, so we could definitely put a CPC meeting in there.
Now, right now, we're set to start at noon that day, not for a CPC meeting, but some of our closed agenda items, which you may recall were about the Arts, Sports, Entertainment District, for example.
Oh, that's right, the Arts, Sports, and Entertainment, right.
Okay, July 8th is the next meeting, which is going to be starting early already. The next one after that would be the 15th, which is no meeting. And then, so how about we refer this to the 22nd? Would that work? Because the 8th was starting at noon already. Okay, so then can we have a motion for that then, that this meeting be adjourned to July the 22nd for a CPC meeting? Is that what I'm hearing? It is already? It's not on our
We
calendar.
could easily schedule that. That's not a problem.
It's not on the calendar yet, but it will be. So let's have a motion, please, if someone would like to. Councillor, okay, Ferguson and Kunst has, okay, so we're going to a CPC meeting of July the 22nd.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we're going to adjourn this CPC meeting to July the 22nd. That's why it will preempt the other topic which was there, which was
Right.
political signs, hence the
Which
adjournment.
we're happy
governs.
to defer. Okay, so are we clear on the motion? The motion is to adjourn this to the July 22nd CPC meeting, which would be at what time? Noon, 1? Well, let's call on that. Let's decide that now. What time would you like that meeting to start?
Maybe we should ask staff, what, like,
Well, is noon okay, Mr. Backen?
Noon is fine. The hesitation is, I know some members of council, well, Councillor Davis, for example, it's hard to predict what the farm is doing, but our challenge is to try to schedule to get everyone in attendance.
Okay, is there an objection to starting at noon on the 22nd?
No, good.
Well, we haven't got a, well, all right. The 15th, I don't know if that's going to work. I think that might be tough to pull a meeting that isn't.
holidays in July, in August, like you just said?
All right, I think we're going to call the question on the 22nd now, and then if that doesn't fly, we can put another date. Otherwise, we have to remove the motion and all those other things too. So the motion is right now that this meeting be adjourned to July 22nd at noon. At noon, okay. So I'm going to call for a show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. And then, so not an adjournment. A motion to adjourn?
Termination.
No, adjourning.
Adjourning.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Second?
No, we have a.
Well, we have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Richter, we have 30 seconds.
But what about having a deferral as well to July 15th or some other date where it's just CPC and procedure bylaw?
Well, how about we do that at the regular meeting then? Call a special meeting or something. But right now, we're at the end of this meeting, and it's been adjourned to the 22nd, and that was passed. Right? So the motion to adjourn has been moved. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we have 10 seconds to go into the next meeting.